The Ho Chi Minh Trail moved at night. Colonel Vo Bam's 559th Transportation Group ran almost everything in darkness, in short shuttle hops from one way station to the next, drivers taking the same segment night after night until they knew every meter of it by feel. They waited for the full moon so they could drive without headlights. They waited for heavy cloud. Trucks rolled shortly after dusk and pulled off the road between 3 and 6 in the morning in time to hide before the first fighter bombers came. The system was slow. It was cumbersome. It worked. Then something started killing the trucks in the dark. It could see them. That was the part the drivers could not explain at first. There were no flares overhead, no obvious aircraft, and then a column of fire would reach down out of the black sky, and a truck would stop existing. It came back the next night, and the night after that. In a single mission, it could destroy or damage 25 vehicles. Over the 1969 to 1970 dry season, the small force that flew these aircraft was credited with destroying a large share of everything Hanoi tried to push down the trail. The North Vietnamese called it the evil bird. This is what the men on the receiving end did about it. Not what they said in interviews after the war, what they built, what they moved, what they spent in the years they were under it. The aircraft was a converted cargo plane, Lockheed C-130 Hercules, 4 engines, a transport airframe never meant to fight, fitted with guns that fired out the left side and a fire control computer that linked them to sensors that worked in the dark. A prototype reached Vietnam in September 1967 and was an immediate success. Analysis put it at roughly 3 times as effective as the older AC-130 gunship it followed. By December 1968, 4 of them were operating out of Ubon in Thailand, flown by the 16th Special Operations Squadron, and inside 3 months, those 4 aircraft and their still inexperienced crews had destroyed 607 trucks, more than a quarter of the entire theater total from 4 airplanes. The later versions got worse for the people underneath them. 2 20mm Gatling guns that could put out thousands of rounds a minute, 2 40mm Bofors cannons. By February 1972, a 105mm artillery piece, an Army howitzer, firing out the side of an orbiting aircraft. It carried infrared, low-light television, and a magnetic anomaly detector called Black Crow that was originally built to find submerged submarines. Black Crow could pick up the unshielded ignition coil of a truck engine through dense jungle canopy. The truck did not have to be seen, it only had to have its engine running. That is the problem the 559th Transportation Group faced. The thing they relied on most, darkness, had stopped being protection. So they answered it the way an army answers a weapon it cannot shoot down fast enough. They tried to make the sky too expensive to fly in. The guns came first, and they came in volume. The trail had always had anti-aircraft protection, 23mm and 37mm, and a few 57mm guns, crewed with skilled gunners. Now the North Vietnamese moved more of them in, heavier, and pushed them as far south as they could reach, lining the truck routes with hilltop emplacements. Stanley Carnot described the late war trail as 18-foot-wide camouflaged highways dotted with rest areas, fuel tanks, and machine shops, all of it protected by anti-aircraft positions on the high ground. The gunship's own crews felt the change. The aircraft that came home shot up. American planners eventually flew the gunships under escort, typically 3 F-4 Phantoms per Spectre, the fighters there to draw and suppress the guns that were now thick enough to need suppressing.
The numbers tell the rest of it. The first gunship went down on May 24, 1969, hit by 37mm fire over southern Laos and lost on its emergency landing at Ubon. 2 crewmen killed. The second fell on April 22, 1970, again to 37mm, again while truck hunting. 10 men listed as killed, 1 survivor. Then the anti-aircraft guns stopped being the worst of it. The North Vietnamese brought in surface-to-air missiles, the SA-2, the big radar-guided weapon. On March 28, 1972, an AC-130A named Prometheus, with Major Irving Ramsoer at the controls, was destroyed by a SAM over the trail near Chepone. There were no survivors. 2 days later, a 57mm round took down the first of the newest E-model gunships near An Loc, though that crew got out. In June, an SA-7, the new shoulder-fired missile with an infrared seeker and no good defense against it, hit a gunship over the A Shau Valley, and the aircraft came apart in the air. In December, near Pak Se, 37mm fire brought down another. 2 men bailed out, 14 did not. 6 gunships were lost in the Vietnam War, 4 of them in 1972 alone, the year the missiles arrived in force. 52 crewmen died in those aircraft. That is the real measure of what the North Vietnamese thought of the evil bird. They did not write it in a captured diary. They wrote it in the cost they were willing to pay and to make the gunship pay to keep their trucks moving. An aircraft that cost roughly $5,000 to put a truck out of action had forced the other side to ring a jungle road with heavy guns, then radar, then missiles, and to throw all of it at 4-engine cargo planes orbiting in the dark. And while they were doing that, they were quietly making the gunship beside the point. If the danger was the night, the answer was to stop using the night. Beginning around 1970 and finishing in early 1972, the North Vietnamese built a second trail, a daytime network, new roads where trucks could drive farther and faster. Crews kept the dust down so passing aircraft saw nothing. Lookouts watched the sky. They still ran some trucks at night to keep the Americans looking in the dark, but the real traffic had moved into the daylight, into the one part of the day the gunship hunters were not watching. It was more efficient than the old nighttime system had ever been. Down that daytime network, in 1972, Hanoi moved an entire army for the Easter offensive. The side that had built the most sophisticated night attack weapon in the theater was, by its own later admission about that spring, largely in the dark. There is a temptation, looking at the kill tallies the Air Force kept, to call the gunship the thing that won the war over the trail. The tallies do not support it. The Spectres were eventually credited with destroying or damaging numbers that climbed toward 30,000 trucks, and even at the time those figures drew heavy criticism because the counting relied on optimistic battle damage assessment, on sensors that misread fuel drums and decoys as kills, on the same vehicle being counted more than once. The aircraft was real, accurate, and terrifying to the men who drove under it. The number of trucks it killed was almost certainly far below what was claimed. What is not in doubt is the response it pulled out of the enemy. A weapon is feared in proportion to what an opponent spends to stop it. By that measure, the gunship was among the most feared things in the sky over Laos, because the People's Army of Vietnam spent years and a great deal of blood arranging the trail around the problem of it, and in the end chose to walk away from the darkness it owned rather than keep losing trucks in it. The 16th Special Operations Squadron flew its last combat sortie on August 15, 1973, and the last battle-weary Spectre touched down at Ubon. The squadron's people kept a record they were proud of: 1,327 consecutive on-time combat launches, a long ledger of trucks, a harder ledger of 52 men. The men they hunted left a record too. It is the Easter offensive, run down a daytime road built specifically so the evil bird could not find it. The clearest thing the North Vietnamese ever said about the gunship is that they decided they could not beat it on its own ground, and so they took the war somewhere it could not follow, in daylight, where nobody was looking.